Hey! Where the hell have you been?
James shouted at Emily, his voice filled with impatience and annoyance.
I went to buy the things you asked for, remember?
Emily replied, trying to keep her tone even and calm despite the growing tension in the room.
Well then, hurry up and hand them over,
James demanded, his hand outstretched expectantly. Emily couldn't understand why she had to be spoken to like this. This wasn't how someone should behave when asking for a favor.
Seriously, when did it come to this?
Emily muttered under her breath, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. She could easily pinpoint the moment when her husband James's attitude had drastically changed. It was after he had been in a car accident that left him unable to walk. Despite Emily's insistence, James had stubbornly refused to stay in the hospital, insisting on returning home. And thanks to that, Emily had been juggling both work and household chores, essentially doing the work of two people.
Whatever. I'm thirsty. Bring me some coffee,
James ordered, his tone dismissive and entitled. As a small act of defiance, Emily brought James a coffee that was hotter than usual. After taking a sip, James must have found it too hot because he dropped the cup, spilling its contents.
You did that on purpose, didn't you?
James accused, his eyes narrowing with suspicion.
Of course not. It's the same as always,
Emily defended herself, feeling a spike of indignation at the baseless accusation.
Like hell it isn't,
James retorted, his voice rising with anger. Then, in a sudden fit of rage, James threw the cup at Emily. Although it didn't hit her face, it struck the back of her hand, causing her to wince in pain.
You've got to be kidding me,
Emily said through gritted teeth, cradling her injured hand.
Who's kidding who?
James shot back, his expression a mix of anger and bitterness. The senseless argument continued for a while until the doorbell rang, bringing it to an abrupt end.
Go answer it,
James commanded, his tone leaving no room for discussion.
I know, I don't need you to tell me,
Emily snapped back, turning on her heel to leave the room. When she opened the door, there stood a person claiming to be a lawyer.
You're a lawyer? But why?
Emily asked, confusion evident in her voice.
I received a consultation request from James.
May I come in? The lawyer explained, his tone professional and courteous.
Oh, sure. I'll show you to James's room,
Emily replied, still trying to process the unexpected visitor. As Emily led the lawyer to James's room, she couldn't help but wonder what on earth was going on. The lawyer's presence seemed to instantly change James's demeanor from irritable to cheerful.
Finally,
James exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face.
Finally?
Emily echoed, her brows furrowing in confusion.
Well, you'll find out soon enough,
James replied cryptically, leaving Emily to wonder what on earth was about to unfold.
So, lawyer, this woman has been cheating on me, right?
James accused, pointing a finger at Emily.
What are you talking about?
Emily exclaimed, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief.
I know all about it. You've been meeting up with another man behind my back, haven't you, Emily?
James pressed, his tone dripping with self-righteous indignation.
Huh? That's impossible. What are you saying?
Emily countered, her mind reeling from the baseless accusation.
Anyway, lawyer, this means we can get a lot of compensation from Emily, right?
James asked eagerly, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. At this, the lawyer James had called for adopted a stern expression.
I'm sorry to say, but there is no evidence to support such a claim,
the lawyer stated firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument.
What? That can't be right.
James sputtered, his confidence faltering.
You what? Are you going to say you saw it with your own eyes?
Emily challenged, her anger rising to match James's earlier accusation.
Well, yes. I saw it with my own eyes.
James insisted, though his voice lacked conviction.
But that doesn't make sense, does it? You can't even go outside, right?
Emily pointed out, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. James's words were becoming more and more irrational by the second.
Or maybe someone's been taking you out. But the only person who comes to the house is the home health aide,
Emily added, her tone dripping with sarcasm.
In any case, there is no evidence to suggest that your wife has been unfaithful, so my work here is done.
The lawyer concluded, standing up to leave.
You've got to be kidding me. Some lawyer you are.
James spat, his face twisting with anger and frustration.
I assure you, I am a lawyer. Now, if you'll excuse me.
The lawyer replied coolly, exiting the room without a backwards glance.
I'm so sorry for making you come all this way for nothing.
Emily apologized to the lawyer, feeling mortified by James's wild accusations. It was beyond embarrassing to have a lawyer come to their home based on James's delusions, only to find that there was no basis for his claims. If there's anything else, please don't hesitate to contact me, the lawyer said, handing Emily his business card before taking his leave.
I understand. Thank you.
Emily replied gratefully, accepting the card with a nod. With a deep sigh, Emily turned and headed back to the room. She found James looking dejected, all his earlier bravado gone.
I hate to kick you when you're down, but I think you owe me a detailed explanation,
Emily said firmly, crossing her arms over her chest. Faced with Emily's determination, James seemed to have no fight left in him. From that moment on, James became as docile as a different person. According to James, he had apparently believed the story told to him by the male home health aide who had been coming to their house. To make matters worse, that man had quit his job a few days ago, leaving no way for Emily to get more details about the story. And now, a new home health aide, a rookie, was coming to their house. Several months passed.
I'm always causing you trouble,
James said one day, his tone apologetic. On weekdays, a home health aide came to help, but on weekends, it was basically Emily who took care of James.
It can't be helped, can it?
Emily replied, trying to keep the weariness out of her voice. It was while Emily was changing James's adult diapers, as she always did. A message from their daughter, Lisa, arrived on Emily's mobile phone.
What?
Emily muttered, her brows furrowing in confusion.
What's wrong?
James asked, picking up on Emily's change in demeanor. No, it's nothing, Emily replied quickly, not wanting to discuss it with James. But as Emily glanced over at James, she was met with an even more shocking sight. You. Emily breathed, her eyes widening in disbelief.
What's wrong?
James asked again, oblivious to the reason for Emily's reaction. Haven't you noticed? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
What are you talking about?
James demanded, his tone growing impatient. No, it's nothing.
I'm just going to go out and do some shopping,
Emily said quickly, forcing a smile.
Oh, okay. Be careful,
James replied, a hint of concern in his voice. As soon as Emily left the house, she immediately called Lisa.
That was...
Emily began, her voice trailing off as she struggled to find the words.
Did you see it? I took that photo the other day. I was so surprised, I just had to take a picture. That's definitely Dad, right?
Lisa asked, her tone a mix of disbelief and urgency.
Yeah, it is,
Emily confirmed, her heart sinking at the realization.
But that's not all. I've been doing some digging, and
Lisa continued, her voice growing more serious with each word. Hearing this, Emily couldn't sit still any longer and immediately headed to the nearest police station. This was too big for me to handle on my own. The situation had escalated beyond my control.
I'm going to the police station right now,
Emily declared, her voice filled with determination.
Then I'll go too,
Lisa offered, her tone equally resolute.
Are you sure?
Emily asked, touched by her daughter's support.
I think things will go more smoothly if I'm there. So, I'll see you at the police station,
Lisa replied, her words filling Emily with a sense of strength and unity. Emily was incredibly grateful for Lisa's cooperation. What was about to begin wasn't just a simple act of revenge. It was a furious retribution. It went without saying what would happen to James now. I'm Emily, 52 years old, and I recently divorced James, who was the same age as me. The reason for the divorce was James, but even now, looking back, I truly believe he was the worst man imaginable.
He was a good person when he was younger, though,
I mused, my thoughts drifting back to the early days of our relationship. James and I had joined the same company at the same time and were colleagues. We were both in sales and had a rivalry that pushed us to be better. We were always competing for the top sales performance.
Damn it! I lost again this time. I was pretty confident, too,
James would say, his frustration evident in his voice.
Well, I could say the same,
I would reply, equally disappointed but determined to do better next time.
Can't you let me have first place once in a while?
James would ask, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth.
I wonder if you'd even be happy if I let you have it,
I would muse, my tone teasing. At this, James would adopt a thoughtful expression.
Maybe I wouldn't be happy? My pride probably wouldn't allow it anyway,
he would admit, his competitive nature shining through.
That's what I thought you'd say,
I would reply, a grin spreading across my face. Seeing our interactions, our colleagues would always gossip about when we were going to start dating. But we were the epitome of taking things at our own pace. Work always came first, and we didn't have much interest in being boyfriend and girlfriend. A change came for us when I was 28 years old. It was when I went back to my hometown for the first time in a while.
Emily, you're already 27, right? How are things going?
My dad asked, his tone a mix of concern and curiosity.
How are things going?
I echoed, not quite understanding what he meant.
Marriage. I'm talking about marriage,
he clarified, his expression growing more serious.
Well, how am I supposed to get married when I don't even have a partner?
I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite the growing tension. Hearing this, Dad just sighed and went back to his room.
I'm sorry, but try to understand Dad's feelings too. You don't have any siblings, Emily, so he's probably just worried,
Mom said gently, her eyes filled with understanding.
Yeah,
I replied, suddenly feeling a bit guilty for my dismissive attitude.
But you know, I'm not telling you to get married right away. You clearly love your job, so there's no need to rush,
Mom added, her words providing a measure of comfort. Even though Mom said that, the conversation lingered in my mind long after I returned home. If I thought about a future where I never got married and lived alone forever, it scared me a little. The only thing waiting for me down that path was a lonely death. That was something I absolutely wanted to avoid. And then, one day during lunch break.
Actually, I went back to my hometown the other day. They asked me when I'm getting married.
But when I said I had no plans, they gave me a blatantly disgusted look. James confided, his tone a mix of frustration and resignation.
I was told the same thing recently. The nuance was different, but it was pretty much the same thing.
I replied, commiserating with his experience.
Seriously?
James asked, his eyes widening in surprise. Seriously. I confirmed, a wry smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. We laughed together, then looked at each other. Why don't we try dating? We're pretty similar, so I think we'd get along well. James suggested, his tone a mix of nervousness and excitement.
I was actually thinking the same thing.
I admitted, feeling a flutter of anticipation in my chest.
I can't imagine getting married right away, so let's start with a trial period. If it doesn't work out, we can just go back to how we were before.
James proposed, his pragmatic approach putting me at ease.
That makes sense.
I agreed, feeling a sense of relief at the thought of taking things slow. And so, we decided to start dating with a trial period. For now, we settled on a period of 3 months. Even so, it was ultimately a temporary relationship, so we agreed that it was okay to prioritize our own circumstances. The 3-month period seemed long, yet short. Our tendency to prioritize work above all else was likely a contributing factor. Hey, why don't we try extending the period a bit longer? James suggested, his tone casual yet hopeful.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea.
I agreed, feeling a sense of relief at not having to make a decision just yet. In this manner, a full year passed by before we knew it. Can I talk to you for a sec? James asked, his expression serious.
Sure. But I think I already know what you're going to say.
I replied, a knowing smile tugging at the corners of my mouth.
You do?
James asked, his eyes widening in surprise. In the end, we officially started dating. In hindsight, what was the point of that trial period? I mused, shaking my head at the memory. If we had just done this from the beginning, everything would have been resolved without all the roundabout nonsense. Hating half measures, we gave our all to both work and our private lives. After we had started dating officially, and when I turned 30. You seem awfully happy about something. James noted, his tone a mix of curiosity and amusement.
Well, you could say that.
I replied, unable to keep the grin off my face. So? What happened? James pressed, his interest piqued.
I got a promotion,
I announced, my voice brimming with pride.
What?
James asked, his jaw dropping in surprise.
So, I'm getting promoted.
I repeated, savoring the moment.
That's amazing.
James stammered, clearly taken aback by the news. Given James's prideful nature, I had expected him to react with displeasure, but that wasn't the case at all. Our relationship was going smoothly, and before we knew it, we were about to turn 31. On a certain holiday morning, James said,
Marry me.
He took a small box out of his pocket as he spoke.
When did you get that?
I exclaimed, my eyes widening in surprise. Well, I found the right moment. James replied, a mischievous grin spreading across his face.
Can I open it?
I asked, my heart racing with anticipation.
Of course,
James said, his tone gentle and encouraging. When I opened the box, there was a ring adorned with a beautiful diamond.
Thank you,
I exclaimed, throwing my arms around James in a tight embrace. Having accepted the proposal, I immediately went to greet my parents. The greetings with my future parents-in-law also went smoothly, and our married life was about to begin. However, a problem arose at this point. Somehow, James had quit his job.
Why?
I asked, my brows furrowing in confusion. I'm sorry.
but there's something I really want to do.
James explained, his tone apologetic yet determined.
Something you want to do?
I echoed, not quite understanding.
I've always admired engineers,
James admitted, his eyes shining with excitement.
but I've never heard you mention that before.
I pointed out, feeling a bit blindsided by this sudden revelation.
Well, I never told anyone. I've saved up a decent amount of money, so it'll work out somehow. Oh, and keep this a secret, okay?
James requested, his tone conspiratorial. And so, our newlywed life, fraught with challenges, began. Quitting the company seemed to be a sudden decision, and apparently, James had told his boss that it was to take care of his parents. I was also asked various questions, but for now, I had no choice but to go along with what James had said.
It's not like I can tell them the truth,
I muttered, feeling a twinge of guilt at the deception. From then on, James shut himself in his room, sitting in front of the computer for hours every day. I knew he was originally a diligent person, but I was worried if he could really catch up by starting to study now. However, something happened that made even that concern fade away. I found out I was pregnant.
Seriously? That's great.
James exclaimed, his face breaking into a wide grin.
Yeah. I have a favor to ask, though. I think there will be more things I'll need your help with from now on,
I said, my tone serious.
Don't worry. I can at least do household chores,
James assured me, his voice filled with confidence. After that, my belly continued to grow steadily. However, James, who had been supportive in the early stages of my pregnancy, seemed to have grown tired of it and started doing nothing more often.
Hey, I'm not feeling well today, so could you prepare your own meals?
I asked, my voice strained with fatigue.
What? Why?
James asked, his tone a mix of confusion and annoyance.
Why? Because my body hurts,
I explained, trying to keep my patience.
You say that, but you can move around just fine,
James retorted, his brows furrowing in disbelief.
It really does hurt,
I insisted, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me.
Fine. I'll go eat out today,
James said, his tone exasperated as he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Was it really something to get so angry about? In the end, I waited for the time of delivery while taking care of most of my personal matters myself. A few weeks later, I gave birth to Lisa. I was relieved that she was born safely. My parents came to the hospital, but James didn't come, saying he was busy. Where's James? My mom asked, her brows furrowing in concern.
He seems to be a bit busy,
I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite the growing unease in the pit of my stomach.
But today is Sunday. Does he work on holidays too?
My dad pressed, his expression skeptical. I hadn't expected to be questioned like this, so I lost my composure. Dad didn't miss that.
Call James right now,
he demanded, his tone leaving no room for argument.
What?
I asked, caught off guard by his sudden request.
Just do it,
Dad insisted, his expression stern.
This has turned into a hassle,
I muttered, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. In this situation, there was no room to refuse.
Fine,
I relented, reaching for my phone. I called James, but he didn't answer.
It seems like he's not picking up. Maybe he really is busy,
I suggested, hoping to placate my father.
Keep calling until he answers,
Dad ordered, his tone unwavering. I had forgotten that Dad was a stubborn man, recognized by both himself and others. After about 5 calls, James finally picked up.
What's up? I'm a bit busy over here,
James said, his tone slightly annoyed.
Well, I just wanted to let you know that the baby was born safely.
I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Then Dad told me to put the phone on speaker. Oh, good job, James said, his tone more casual than congratulatory.
Thanks,
I replied, feeling a mix of relief and unease. At that moment, all I could do was pray that James wouldn't say anything unnecessary.
So, when are you getting discharged? I'm alone here, and the housework is piling up. I need you to do it,
James continued, his tone almost demanding. I thought it was over. Looking at Dad, I saw an expression filled with anger.
Anyway, I think I can be discharged soon. So, talk to you later,
I said hurriedly, trying to end the conversation before things escalated further. After that, I was desperately trying to calm Dad down. He was ranting, demanding that I
call James here,
and criticizing him. Mom managed to handle the situation somehow, realizing that this would cause trouble for the hospital, but from then on, the joy of giving birth had completely vanished. This incident marked the beginning of the deterioration of my relationship with Dad. In the end, after visiting my parents' home when Lisa was in preschool, I never went back. As for James, he managed to find a job 6 months after I gave birth to Lisa.
I'm glad you found a job,
I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me.
Well, I studied hard, even sacrificing sleep,
James replied, a hint of pride in his voice. I think James was somewhat energetic until Lisa entered elementary school. However, that too came to an end due to James's selfish behavior.
No way! Again!
I exclaimed, feeling a wave of disbelief and frustration wash over me.
Well, the work itself was enjoyable. But, I just didn't fit in with the company, or rather, I realized it too late,
James explained, his tone almost nonchalant.
You're just realizing that now?
I asked, my voice rising with anger.
Don't get so angry,
James said, his tone defensive.
Of course I'm going to get angry,
I retorted, feeling my patience wearing thin. James had become unemployed again. I wanted to talk to someone about this, but since I had become estranged from my parents, I couldn't rely on them. But even so, I had allies. It was my parents-in-law. They were very warm, had excellent personalities, and were truly admirable people. I couldn't help but wonder how someone like James could have been raised by such wonderful people. However, even that life quickly came to an end. It happened suddenly. It was when Lisa was in 9th grade. Around this time, James had given up on working for a company and was working as a freelancer on a small scale.
My parents died,
James said, his voice devoid of emotion.
What? Stop joking around like that,
I replied, not wanting to believe what I had just heard.
Why would I need to lie about something like that?
James asked, his tone growing defensive.
How could this happen?
I muttered, feeling a sense of shock and disbelief wash over me.
You knew they were on a trip, right? Apparently, they got caught up in an accident,
James explained, his voice strained with grief. The thought of never being able to see them again hit me all at once, bringing a wave of sadness and a sense of loss. Even James seemed at a loss for words at that moment. This significant event led James to start going out drinking almost every night. He didn't seem to be working, and his daily rhythm became irregular.
Is work going okay lately?
I asked, feeling a growing sense of concern.
I don't need you to worry about me,
James replied, his tone dismissive.
You shouldn't talk like that,
I said, feeling a spike of frustration at his attitude.
Can't you just be quiet for a bit?
James snapped, his voice filled with irritation. The conversations between us as a couple also noticeably decreased. If I tried to talk to him, he would make a displeased face. Lisa also started to avoid talking to James when he was like that. That didn't change even as she progressed through high school and university. And then, when Lisa became a senior, Lisa started living on her own when she entered university, so it was just James and me at home. There was hardly any conversation, whether we were eating or in the living room. We had completely grown cold. Then, one day, "I'm going out for a meeting today. I think I'll be back in the evening," James said, his tone businesslike and detached. After saying that, James left. Since it was Saturday, I was taking care of household chores that I couldn't do on weekdays when I received a phone call. They said James had been hit by a car on his way back from the meeting. I contacted Lisa, and we both headed to the hospital. "Oh, you came," James said, his tone casual despite the situation.
"Are you okay?"
I asked, my voice filled with concern.
"It seems like both my legs are broken, but I'll manage somehow,"
James replied, trying to sound reassuring.
"I see. That's good,"
I said, feeling a sense of relief that James was all right. However, this was just the beginning. James was hospitalized for about 2 months and was discharged after recovering enough to walk. But a week later, he felt pain in his legs and went to the hospital. This time, due to the excessive pain, he went to a nearby hospital he had visited once before.
"This isn't good,"
the doctor said, his tone grave.
"What?"
I asked, feeling a sense of dread wash over me.
"It seems like the condition of his legs is not good,"
the doctor explained, his expression somber.
"So what's going to happen?"
I asked, my voice trembling with fear.
"Depending on the case, there's a possibility he may become unable to move,"
the doctor replied, his words hitting me like a punch to the gut.
"No way!"
I exclaimed, feeling a wave of panic wash over me. I was worried sick, but I also felt a sense of doubt. James was strangely calm.
"For now, let's wait and see,"
the doctor suggested, his tone meant to be reassuring. "Okay," I replied, feeling a sense of helplessness wash over me. On the way home, James couldn't walk without support.
"Are you okay?"
I asked, my brows furrowing with concern.
"No, it's really painful,"
James admitted, his face contorted with pain.
"Let's get home quickly,"
I said, trying to hurry our pace. Within a month, just as the doctor had said, James became unable to walk.
"For now, let's call an ambulance,"
I suggested, reaching for my phone. But James said,
"I want to go by taxi. An ambulance would be more reliable,"
I argued, feeling a spike of frustration at his stubbornness.
"No, I just can't walk, that's all,"
James insisted, his tone dismissive. Following James's words, I called a taxi, and we headed to the previous hospital.
"So, what's the situation?"
I asked, my heart pounding with anxiety.
The condition is quite bad,"
the doctor replied, his tone grave.
"So, he won't be able to walk anymore?"
I asked, feeling a sense of dread wash over me.
"That's right,"
the doctor confirmed, his words like a heavy weight on my chest. Looking back now, maybe I should have been more suspicious. In the end, James was diagnosed with paraplegia and became unable to move without a wheelchair. Hospitalization was suggested, but he wanted to recuperate at home. However, since James would be alone on weekdays, we decided to request a home health aide. One was a man in his 30s, and the other was a young woman in her early 20s who was still in training. One day, while living like this,
"Hey! Where the hell have you been?"
James shouted, his tone accusatory and angry.
I went to buy the things you asked for, didn't I?
I replied, trying to keep my tone even despite the growing tension.
Then hurry up and hand them over,
James demanded, his hand outstretched expectantly. Why did I have to be spoken to like this? This wasn't the attitude of someone asking for a favor.
Seriously, when did it come to this?
I muttered, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. It was because he had been in a car accident and lost the ability to walk. James, who hated being hospitalized, selfishly said, I want to go home. Thanks to that, I had been doing the work of two people, both my job and household chores.
Whatever. I'm thirsty. Bring me some coffee,
James ordered, his tone dismissive and entitled. As a small act of resistance, I brought James coffee that was hotter than usual. After taking a sip, James must have found it too hot because he dropped the cup.
You did that on purpose, didn't you?
James accused, his eyes narrowing with suspicion.
Of course not. It's the same as always.
I defended myself, feeling a spike of indignation at the baseless accusation.
Like hell it isn't,
James retorted, his voice rising with anger. Then, James threw the cup at me. It didn't hit my face, but it struck the back of my hand, causing me to wince in pain. You've got to be kidding me, I said through gritted teeth, cradling my injured hand. Who's kidding who? James shot back, his expression a mix of anger and bitterness. The unreasonable argument continued for a while, but it came to an end when the doorbell rang.
Go answer it,
James commanded, his tone leaving no room for discussion.
I know, I don't need you to tell me,
I snapped back, turning on my heel to leave the room. Then, the person who appeared claimed to be a lawyer.
You're a lawyer? But why?
I asked, confusion evident in my voice.
I received a consultation request from James. May I come in?
The lawyer explained, his tone professional and courteous.
Oh, sure. I'll show you to James's room,
I replied, still trying to process the unexpected visitor. I led the lawyer to James's room, but I had no idea why this was happening. Upon seeing the lawyer, James, who had been irritated until just a moment ago, broke into a smile.
Finally,
James exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face.
Finally?
I echoed, my brows furrowing in confusion.
Well, you'll find out soon enough,
James replied cryptically, leaving me to wonder what on earth was about to unfold.
So, lawyer, Emily has been cheating on me, right?
James accused, pointing a finger at me.
What are you talking about?
I exclaimed, my eyes wide with shock and disbelief.
I know all about it. You've been meeting up with another man behind my back, haven't you, Emily?
James pressed, his tone dripping with self-righteous indignation.
Huh? That's impossible. What are you saying?
I countered, my mind reeling from the baseless accusation.
Anyway, lawyer, this means we can get a lot of compensation from Emily, right?
James asked eagerly, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. At this, the lawyer James had called for adopted a stern expression.
I'm sorry to say, but there is no evidence to support such a claim,
the lawyer stated firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument.
What? That can't be right. I mean,
James sputtered, his confidence faltering.
You what? Are you going to say you saw it with your own eyes?
I challenged, my anger rising to match James's earlier accusation.
Well, yes. I saw it with my own eyes,
James insisted, though his voice lacked conviction.
But that doesn't make sense, does it? You can't even go outside, right?
I pointed out, my eyes narrowing suspiciously. James's words were becoming more and more irrational by the second.
Or maybe someone's been taking you out. But the only person who comes to the house is the home health aide,
I added, my tone dripping with sarcasm.
In any case, there is no evidence to suggest that your wife has been unfaithful, so my work here is done.
The lawyer concluded, standing up to leave.
You've got to be kidding me. Some lawyer you are.
James spat, his face twisting with anger and frustration.
I assure you, I am a lawyer. Now, if you'll excuse me.
The lawyer replied coolly, exiting the room without a backwards glance.
I'm so sorry for making you come all this way for nothing.
I apologized to the lawyer, feeling mortified by James's wild accusations. It was beyond embarrassing to have a lawyer come to our home based on James's delusions, only to find that there was no basis for his claims.
If there's anything else, please don't hesitate to contact me,
the lawyer said, handing me his business card before taking his leave.
I understand. Thank you.
I replied gratefully, accepting the card with a nod. With a deep sigh, I turned and headed back to the room. I found James looking dejected, all his earlier bravado gone.
I hate to kick you when you're down, but I think you owe me a detailed explanation,
I said firmly, crossing my arms over my chest. Faced with my determination, James seemed to have no fight left in him. From that moment on, James became as docile as a different person. According to James, he had apparently believed the story told to him by the male home health aide who had been coming to our house. To make matters worse, that man had quit his job a few days ago, leaving no way for me to get more details about the story. And now, a new home health aide, a rookie, was coming to our house. Several months passed.
I'm always causing you trouble,
James said one day, his tone apologetic. On weekdays, a home health aide came to help, but on weekends, it was basically me who took care of James.
It can't be helped, can it?
I replied, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. It was while I was changing James's adult diapers, as I always did. A message from our daughter, Lisa, arrived on my mobile phone.
What?
I muttered, my brows furrowing in confusion.
What's wrong?
James asked, picking up on my change in demeanor. No, it's nothing, I replied quickly, not wanting to discuss it with James. But as I glanced over at James, I was met with an even more shocking sight. You, I breathed, my eyes widening in disbelief.
What's wrong?
James asked again, oblivious to the reason for my reaction.
Haven't you noticed?
I asked, my voice barely above a whisper.
What are you talking about?
James demanded, his tone growing impatient.
No, it's nothing. I'm just going to go out and do some shopping,
I said quickly, forcing a smile.
Oh, okay. Be careful,
James replied, a hint of concern in his voice. As soon as I left the house, I immediately called Lisa.
That was...
I began, my voice trailing off as I struggled to find the words.
Did you see it? I took that photo the other day. I was so surprised, I just had to take a picture. That's definitely Dad, right?
Lisa asked, her tone a mix of disbelief and urgency.
Yeah, it is,
I confirmed, my heart sinking at the realization.
But that's not all. I've been doing some digging, and...
Lisa continued, her voice growing more serious with each word. Hearing this, I couldn't sit still any longer and immediately headed to the nearest police station. This was too big for me to handle on my own. The situation had escalated beyond my control.
I'm going to the police station right now,
I declared, my voice filled with determination.
Then I'll go too,
Lisa offered, her tone equally resolute.
Are you sure?
I asked, touched by my daughter's support.
I think things will go more smoothly if I'm there. So, I'll see you at the police station,
Lisa replied, her words filling me with a sense of strength and unity. I was incredibly grateful for Lisa's cooperation. What was about to begin wasn't just a simple act of revenge. It was a furious retribution. When I arrived at the police station, I told them that James had been lying about not being able to walk. I reported that he had been fraudulently receiving medical expenses from the insurance company. How did I realize this? First, it was the photo Lisa had sent me. In it, there was James, walking boldly with the young female home health aide.
I see. He's definitely walking normally in this,
the police officer noted, his brows raised in surprise. While this photo alone was decisive evidence, I had also noticed James's toes moving when they shouldn't have, as I was changing his adult diapers. Why hadn't I noticed it sooner?
But we can't just arrest him right away, can we?
I asked, feeling a mix of frustration and uncertainty.
You're right,
the officer agreed, nodding his head in understanding.
We'll make a decision after conducting a thorough investigation on our end,
he explained, his tone professional and reassuring.
I understand. In that case, I'll also consult with a lawyer,
I replied, already forming a plan in my mind.
If you're going to take action quickly, that might be a good idea,
the officer advised, his words filling me with a sense of determination. Lisa and I left the police station.
But do you have a lawyer in mind?
Lisa asked, her brows furrowing with concern.
Don't worry about that,
I replied, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I took out a business card from my wallet. Then I immediately made an appointment. It was to return the favor to James for what he had done to me before. We went straight to the law office and explained the situation. They said they would take action right away.
Leave it to us. We will definitely meet your expectations,
the lawyer assured me, his tone confident and resolute.
Thank you very much,
I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. After parting ways with Lisa for the time being, I returned home.
You're late,
James shouted, his tone accusatory and angry.
The supermarket was a bit crowded,
I explained, trying to keep my voice even despite the growing tension.
Hurry up and prepare the food,
James demanded, his entitlement as strong as ever. I no longer felt irritated like I used to. Now, I just wanted to show James hell as soon as possible. I kept in frequent contact with the lawyer, and all the preparations were made. The operation was set to be carried out the following Monday. I took paid leave to prepare for it. Then, in the afternoon, I met up with the lawyer in front of the entrance.
Shall we go then?
The lawyer asked, his tone businesslike and determined.
Yes,
I replied, feeling a surge of adrenaline course through my veins. We opened the front door and headed towards James's room.
Why are you here? And who's that guy next to you?
James demanded, his eyes widening with surprise and suspicion.
Long time no see,
the lawyer greeted, his tone cool and professional.
I've brought him here today to expose your true nature,
I explained, my voice filled with a mix of anger and triumph.
True nature?
James echoed, his brows furrowing in confusion. First, I threw the photo Lisa had taken at James.
It's laughable that you can't walk after seeing this. Everything has been exposed,
I declared, my tone dripping with sarcasm.
I'm sorry to say, but we've investigated everything, including that person over there. First, her name is Susan, and she's 24 years old.
the lawyer revealed, his words hitting James like a punch to the gut. At this, Susan, James's mistress, tried to stop him. "I'll tell you everything," she said, her voice trembling with fear. "Good decision," I replied, feeling a sense of satisfaction wash over me. It seems that the two of them first got involved when James had the accident. It was supposed to be a traffic accident, but the other party was this Susan. At first, she apparently planned to threaten James and steal money from him, but somewhere along the way, she became attracted to him. That's when she introduced him to that hospital. Its true identity was a dangerous hospital that would write any diagnosis as long as you paid them money.
I see. I didn't know that much, but this is quite substantial evidence.
The lawyer noted, his expression serious and thoughtful. Later on, that hospital would develop into a case big enough to make the news, but that's another story. Furthermore, it was all under Susan's orders that James hired a lawyer to try to discredit me.
You've done quite a lot for someone so young,
I said, my tone a mix of sarcasm and disbelief.
For now, what you two have done is a proper act of infidelity. That's why I'm divorcing James, and I'm going to make sure you two pay compensation in the divorce trial. After all, I have a skilled lawyer on my side,
I declared, my voice filled with determination and righteous anger.
Wait! Calm down,
James stammered, his eyes wide with panic.
It's impossible. And what you've done is also fraud, so you might get arrested. Well, I'll contact you again. Bye,
I said, leaving those words behind as I left the house. After that, I successfully submitted the divorce application. And with that, this problem was settled for the time being.
Well then, I'll return to the office for now and take care of the procedures for compensation in the divorce trial,
the lawyer said, his tone businesslike and efficient.
Please do,
I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me.
Leave it to me,
the lawyer assured me, his words filling me with confidence. After parting ways with the lawyer, I sent a message to James. Then, immediately, a call from James. Of course, I didn't answer that call. There were a lot of voice messages left, so I tried listening to one of them, and it was all about things I didn't care about, like,
I don't want to pay compensation in the divorce trial, and I can't get in touch with Susan.
About 6 months passed since then. Lisa successfully graduated from university and started a new life. But there was also something that surprised me.
Actually, there's someone I want to marry,
Lisa confided, her tone a mix of nervousness and excitement.
Marriage,
I exclaimed, my eyes widening in surprise.
It's someone I've been dating since high school,
Lisa explained, a smile spreading across her face.
Since high school?
I asked, feeling like one problem had been resolved only for another to take its place. It wasn't that I was against the marriage itself. It's just that, given what had just happened to me, I was worried about her partner. And when Lisa brought her fiancé to meet me, I was surprised again. Her partner was Daniel, Lisa's childhood friend who lived next door.
I guess I have no choice but to allow this marriage,
I said, feeling a mix of resignation and relief.
Thank you, Mom,
Lisa replied, her eyes shining with gratitude.
I'm sorry for the timing,
Daniel apologized, his tone sincere and contrite. You don't need to apologize. It's my problem, after all, I assured him, trying to ease his concerns.
I will definitely make her happy,
Daniel promised, his voice filled with determination.
Please take care of her,
I replied, entrusting my daughter's happiness to him. Then, I visited my parents' home to report the fact that I hadn't been in contact with them for a long time.
It's been a while,
I began, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. "It's good that you came back," my mom said, her tone warm and welcoming.
"This is Lisa,"
I introduced, gesturing to my daughter beside me.
"She's grown so much. Come in for now,"
my dad said, his expression a mix of surprise and fondness. I told them about my divorce and Lisa's marriage.
"I see. A report of divorce and marriage, how should I put it?"
My dad mused, his brows furrowed in thought. "It's kind of strange, isn't it?" I asked, feeling a sense of awkwardness hang in the air.
"It is,"
my dad agreed, nodding his head in understanding. We were both in a state of probing each other, but that gradually loosened up. I think our relationship has improved to the point where we can have casual conversations like we used to, with the distance between our hearts narrowing. Even so, to think that Lisa, who was still small, is already getting married. "It feels kind of strange," my mom said, her tone a mix of nostalgia and disbelief. "So, what kind of person is her partner?" my dad asked, his curiosity piqued. He's a childhood friend who lives next door," I explained, feeling a sense of pride and happiness for my daughter.
"Oh?"
my dad replied, his eyebrows raised in surprise. From there, the conversation continued to liven up with talk of Lisa's marriage. Dad's face also started to show more smiles. Even Dad, who had been so strict, had a softer expression on his face as he looked at Lisa, the grandchild he hadn't seen since she was born. It was then that it happened. "I'm sorry for everything until now," Dad said, apologizing to me.
"It's fine now. Hurry up and raise your head,"
I insisted, not wanting him to dwell on the past. "I'm sorry," my mom chimed in, her voice filled with regret. "Mom, it's okay now. I had my own faults too. It's not something for you two to apologize for," I assured them, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "Thank you," my parents replied, their voices filled with gratitude and relief. It seems that Dad had been carrying a sense of guilt ever since that day when we had almost become estranged. However, Dad was also stubborn, so he couldn't bring himself to contact me first. Mom, knowing Dad's personality, had apparently decided to leave the decision up to Dad. Then, perhaps because he felt relieved, tears welled up in Dad's eyes.
"Are you crying, by any chance?"
I asked, feeling a mix of surprise and amusement.
"Shut up,"
Dad retorted, his tone gruff but lacking any real anger. Touched by the genuine kindness of my parents, Lisa also looked happy. I think it was really good that we were able to deepen our bonds with our family once again. That night, "I thought you would contact me," I said, picking up the phone with a sense of resignation.
"Then let's get straight to the point. Actually, I'm living in a hotel right now, and I'm running out of money,"
James began, his tone desperate and pleading. At this point, I could only sigh in exasperation at James, who could only say such things. "Oh, I see. That's rough," I replied, my tone dripping with sarcasm.
"What's with that reaction? It's like you're talking about some stranger,"
James stammered, his voice filled with disbelief. "Well, it's only natural. Because we are, in fact, strangers," I pointed out, feeling a sense of satisfaction at the truth of my words. "Don't you have any sympathy for your ex-husband?" James asked, his tone growing more desperate with each word.
"None. And you have your beloved Susan, don't you?"
I retorted, my anger rising to the surface once more. "She ran away a long time ago," James admitted, his voice filled with bitterness and resentment. According to James, things had been tough after the compensation was demanded in the divorce trial. Moreover, he was currently in the middle of a trial for fraud. Since it was a considerable amount, Susan apparently had to borrow her parents' help to pay. As a result, she ended up having to return to her parents' home and was placed under their supervision.
So, you were abandoned by a woman, and with no one else to turn to, you contacted me.
I summarized, feeling a mix of pity and disgust.
Even a little is fine. Even $500. No, $100 is enough.
James pleaded, his tone growing more desperate with each word.
I guess divorcing this kind of man was the right decision after all,
I said, feeling a sense of vindication wash over me.
Anyway, I have nothing to give you. No matter how much you struggle, it has nothing to do with me. Well, do your best to live your life,
I said, my tone final and unyielding. If James had seriously considered us, maybe things wouldn't have turned out this way, but there's no point in thinking about that now. It might have been a blessing that I was able to start a new life together with Lisa and her husband. I had intended to live alone, but I was happy when Lisa suggested that we live together. I don't know where James is or what he's doing to make a living now. And that's fine. After all, I have nothing to do with him anymore.
Mom, what's wrong? You have a difficult expression on your face,
Lisa asked, her brows furrowed with concern.
Really?
I was just thinking about that man, I replied, my thoughts still lingering on the past.
Ah, that man. Don't tell me, do you still have feelings for him?
Lisa asked, her tone cautious and hesitant. I turned to her with a smile.
I don't have any lingering feelings. I'm feeling refreshed now,
I assured her, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. From now on, I will live a life that I find enjoyable. I will definitely make up for the time I spent on James, no matter what.
Surely I've been transferring $1,000, right? Why has it dropped to just $50?
I couldn't help but raise my voice, yet Mom, in front of me, seemed as calm as ever. A year ago, after Dad passed away from an illness, and both Robert and I had moved out, Mom was living alone. Concerned about her future, we decided to provide Mom with $1,000 in financial support each month. However, Mom's words were,
"Thank you for the $50 in financial support you always send." Wait, Mom. I'm sure I've been transferring $1,000 every month. We've talked about this before, haven't we? Yes, dear. But I thought $1,000 might be too much for you, so I kept quiet. Even $50 is enough to show your care, and it makes me happy,
Mom said kindly. Her words brought tears to my eyes, but at the same time, I was swirled with disbelief over the missing $950.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Mom. But could you show me the transaction history of your account, just to check?
Upon my request, Mom took out the bank account statement from the cupboard and showed it to me. Indeed, the bank account had only been credited with $50 each month.
This isn't right. There must be some mistake. How about we change your bank account, just in case?
I suggested. Mom replied,
Indeed, if Nancy really has been transferring $1,000, then something is wrong. I'll check with the bank.
After Mom consulted the bank, it turned out there was no error in the transfers. Despite my suspicions, Mom had switched the financial support to a new bank account she opened at a different bank.
From next month, I'll transfer the financial support to this new bank account. Thank you. I feel bad, though. Really, you don't have to strain yourself.
Every time Mom showed concern for me, I felt an even stronger desire to support her. After changing the bank account, the strange discrepancy in amounts ceased, and I was able to support Mom as initially planned. Months later, upon returning from work, I found Robert, with a furious expression, waiting for me at the entrance of my apartment building. As siblings, Robert now lives away from our childhood home. As I approached him, Robert raised his eyebrows and suddenly shouted angrily. Wondering why he was mad, he kicked the wall and yelled, "Enough with the jokes! You've been skipping out on the financial support for Mom, haven't you?" My name is Nancy. I've been working as a civil servant for 10 years now, at the age of 33. Since my student days, my goal has been to lead a stable life, not only for myself but also to make my parents proud. Dad worked in legal affairs for a prestigious company, handling vast knowledge and making heavy decisions, which I've admired since I was young. Mom was a housewife, calm and kind. She never got unfairly angry and always taught us important lessons, making her the ideal mom. Proud to be their child, I've always planned to make them proud as an adult. After getting a job, true to my resolve, I've been treating my parents to meals on payday and taking them on trips, repaying them for their kindness in my own way. I have an older brother who is 3 years older than me. His name is Robert. He's my complete opposite, lacking any semblance of stability, carefree and irresponsible since our childhood. Contrary to me, who had good grades and never missed nor was late for class, Robert's attitude in class was poor, always drawing attention, and his grades were mediocre at best. Due to his habit of skipping school, his attendance was unreliable. When I was in middle school, I once lost my patience with Robert's attitude and confronted him. "Do you not realize that our comfortable life is thanks to Dad earning and Mom taking care of the house? You're in high school, and Dad's paying your tuition. The meals and clothes are all thanks to Mom's hard work the day before. Don't you see you're wasting their effort? Your room is a mess, you skip school. Don't you feel sorry for Dad and Mom?" Lying on his dirty bed, Robert casually replied, "My life is my own. Why do I have to try hard for our parents? Is that all you want, Nancy? Being serious just to get praised by Dad and Mom, and you're happy with that?" Seeing his attitude, I felt my blood boil. It wasn't about getting praised. I just wanted to be a daughter they wouldn't be ashamed of. Yet, Robert didn't try to understand my feelings at all. "I don't care anymore. If Robert makes Dad and Mom sad, I'll make them happy." Back then, that was as far as our arguments would go. Despite going to college thanks to our parents, Robert continued to live irresponsibly, not finding a proper job. He moved out and worked part-time jobs, which never lasted long, and of course, his income didn't improve. Eventually, he got into a shotgun marriage with someone he met at one of his jobs, only to divorce within 2 years, truly hopeless. I was frustrated and angry at Robert, feeling sorry for our parents who tried to help him in every way. And I continued to support our parents steadily, but then, a year ago, Dad passed away. With Robert and I already independent, our childhood home was left to Mom alone. Although Mom receives old age pension and survivor benefits, and had savings, there were still concerns. So, I decided to financially support Mom. There were maintenance costs for the house, and I wanted her to have money to use freely. I could have proceeded with this alone, but I decided to inform Robert as well. I doubted he had given any thought to Mom's living situation. I hoped he might reconsider his stance upon hearing my plan. On the way back from Dad's funeral, Robert's reaction to my plan to support Mom was better than expected.
"That's a good idea. It must be lonely for her alone. At least we can make sure she doesn't struggle financially."
I was surprised by Robert's words. I never expected such a response from someone who had never shown much filial piety. "You think so too, Robert? Thank you for agreeing." And my response was genuine. Though we had been distant siblings, this might be a chance to mend our relationship.
Of course. It'd be hard for you to send $1,000 alone. How about we split it, $500 each?
I was taken aback.
Really, Robert? You're going to contribute? Aren't you still earning an hourly wage? Are you sure? I'm working a lot, so it's fine. If I cut back on going out, I can definitely contribute $500. I'm your brother after all, so you can rely on me a bit, right?
I felt my eyes well up. I had never liked Robert much, despising the irresponsible life he led despite our parents' upbringing. I never thought of relying on Robert. Perhaps Dad's passing had changed his outlook. Or maybe Robert had grown up without my realization. Struggling to hold back tears, I awkwardly replied, "Don't suddenly start acting all high and mighty just because you're my brother. It throws me off. But thank you. Let's do our best together from now on." And so, we agreed to support Mom together. However, just 3 months later,
it looks like I can't manage the $500 every month after all.
That was the message I received from Robert, who had promised to support Mom financially with me. The Robert the First had briefly considered reliable turned out to be unreliable after all. Disappointed as I was, considering Robert's financial situation, it seemed unavoidable and I had to accept it.
What happened to managing if you just saved a bit?
I did save.
But the store I was working at closed down, and now I'm out of a job. Just getting by on what I have until I find something new.
I'm really sorry. Faced with that, there was nothing I could say.
Okay, I'll take care of the entire $1,000 for Mom's financial support then. You focus on finding a job. Let's not worry Mom, okay?
I ended the call with that. Given Robert's situation, it was clear he couldn't afford to continue the support if he was out of work. Though I was a bit exasperated by my unreliable brother, I hoped he might offer to help again once his situation improved. I decided to transfer $1,000 to Mom's bank account every month on my own. Months have passed since I started to support Mom by myself. I called Mom one holiday to catch up. At first, we chatted about trivial things like recent meals, places we'd visited, and my job. But then, Mom said something that caught my attention.
By the way, Nancy, thank you for the financial support you send to my bank account every month.
Hearing Mom's words of thanks warmed my heart. While $1,000 isn't a small amount, just hearing Mom's calm voice made any financial squeeze seem trivial.
Don't mention it, Mom. I just want you to live comfortably. Treat yourself to something nice once in a while, okay?
Then Mom, in her ever-kind voice, replied,
"That's very kind of you. The $50 you send every month really helps." Wait, what?
I exclaimed, shocked, over the phone.
Wait, Mom. I've definitely been transferring $1,000 every month. We've talked about this before, right?
My heart raced. $1,000 dropping to just $50? That can't be. Impossible. I clearly remember telling Mom about the financial support plan with Robert. She hesitated many times, but I insisted.
Yes, dear. But I thought the $1,000 might be too much for you, so I stayed quiet. Even $50 is enough to feel your kindness, and I'm happy with that.
Mom reassured me with those words. While her warmth touched my heart, I also felt a swirl of dissatisfaction about where the rest of the $950 was going.
I'm glad you feel that way, Mom, but I've been transferring $1,000. It's strange for money to just disappear like that.
As I spoke, trembling with unease, Mom's tone turned serious, perhaps realizing the strangeness of the situation. Is that so? If you've really been sending $1,000 every month, then something's wrong. This might be serious.
Mom, just to be safe, can you show me the transaction history of your account? I'll come over tomorrow.
Today was Saturday, and tomorrow being Sunday meant I was off work. The family home was close by, allowing me to visit with ease. So, the next day, I headed to the family home where Mom was waiting. Despite being on her own now, the family home was well kept, and Mom looked healthy after not seeing her for a while, which reassured me. Mom and I decided to check the account transaction history, as promised, after some casual conversation. Mom brought out the transaction history from the cupboard to show me. Indeed, the amount deposited into that bank account was only $50 each month. I was speechless. $950 was disappearing every month. Even though I had more leeway than Robert, it was still the money I earned from working hard every month, not a small amount by any means. I felt the blood drain from my face, and my hands holding the transaction history trembled.
This doesn't make sense.
For good measure, I checked the transaction history number. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The account number listed was completely different from the one I had been transferring money to every month.
Mom, this bank account number is different from the one I've been transferring to. Why?
Tears welled up as I looked up at Mom, who stared back at me, shocked.
Really? What's going on?
There was no hint of deceit or feigned ignorance in Mom's expression. The thought that I might have been unknowingly sending $1,000 each month to a stranger's bank account sent chills down my spine. After discussing it, Mom and I agreed to open a new bank account.
It's unsettling, so let's make a new bank account. If we use this account exclusively for financial support and keep it separate from everything else, there should be no mistakes.
The next day, Mom promptly opened a new bank account at a different bank and gave me the number a few weeks later. Starting next month, I'll transfer the financial support to this new bank account.
Thank you. I feel bad, though. Really, you don't have to go to all this trouble.
Every time Mom expressed concern, I felt even more determined to support her. No, it's okay. Hey, why don't we go out and eat something delicious together sometime? A nice restaurant opened up near me. Even such trivial conversations brought me joy. I sincerely wished for Mom's health and peace. Just as my payday arrived, I transferred $1,000 to Mom's new bank account. The next day, after emailing Mom, I received a message confirming the deposit of $1,000 and her words of thanks.
I'm glad. Now the money will definitely reach Mom.
Though losing money over several months was regrettable, knowing the funds would now reliably reach Mom provided some relief. And so, the following month, I sent the financial support to that bank account again. As the process of sending financial support smoothly continued. One day, as I was about to return home from work, someone was waiting at the entrance of my apartment. I use my car for commuting, and as I looked up from the window, I saw a figure standing in front of my room. It was Robert, whom I hadn't contacted since then, waiting with an angry expression. I hadn't heard from Robert since he lost his job and was unable to contribute to the financial support. Since I could support Mom on my own, I never prompted Robert to contribute again. Though I once felt he was reliable, our relationship had ultimately become distant. Why would Robert suddenly show up at my place? I parked my car and hurried to the front of the apartment. Robert, who had been waiting with anger, now looked red-faced. Upon seeing me, he furrowed his brows and suddenly raised his voice aggressively.
Hey, Nancy! Don't lie to Mom!
Startled by his threatening manner, I involuntarily stepped back.
What's wrong all of a sudden? Why are you angry after showing up out of nowhere?
Completely bewildered, I could only ask, puzzled by the sudden confrontation. I had plans for the rest of the day. I don't have time to be talking to Robert like this. Sighing, I looked up at Robert who, for some reason, was getting infuriated in front of me. Then Robert, kicking the wall violently, raised his voice.
Don't pretend you don't know. It's about you slacking off on the financial support for Mom. What are you talking about?
Shocked by his absurd claim, I was speechless. Of course, I've been transferring money to Mom's new bank account, and even if there were circumstances that prevented me from sending money, Robert, who hasn't been in touch for a long time, has no reason to be this angry at me. Besides, I didn't even want to speak to Robert anymore.
I've been transferring the financial support. The deposit amount to Mom was weird, so we created a new bank account together and I've been sending it there.
As I said this calmly, Robert distorted his face and blocked my way into the house as if to stop me.
What's that about changing the bank account? Why didn't you report it to me? Why should I, when you said you couldn't provide financial support anyway? You said you couldn't afford it until you found a new job. I don't understand why you're angry, but you have no right to say anything.
I'm in a hurry and want to get into the house quickly. Yet, Robert won't move out of the way and keeps snapping at me.
Don't say that. I found a new job. I'm getting the hang of it and can start contributing to the financial support next month. So, tell me the new bank account.
Frustration grows over not being able to enter the house and Robert's irresponsible behavior. After gritting my teeth, I looked up at Robert.
I can't tell you. I definitely won't tell you. What's with getting mad all of a sudden? Why?
How long does he plan to play dumb? I couldn't hold back any longer and confronted Robert with the truth.
Did you think you wouldn't get caught? Even though I transferred $1,000 to Mom, only $50 reached her. And it's all because of you. Don't talk nonsense. Just hand over the debit card you're using for the financial support now.
Robert shouted and grabbed my bag, shaking it forcefully.
Stop it. Pretending you don't know is useless.
On the day I went to Mom's house to see the transaction history, Mom had told me a story. Apparently, right after it was decided to provide financial support, Robert contacted her, saying they needed to change the bank account and handed her a new debit card. Mom, assuming that Robert and I had arranged everything, didn't tell me about it, which was understandable. Afterward, I discussed the situation with my friend Thomas, who works at a bank. Taking the matter seriously, Thomas helped uncover a shocking fact. The new bank account given to Mom was opened by Robert, who had been withdrawing the $1,000 I was sending to the original account. And into the new account, it seems only $50 was being deposited.
It's terrible to deceive both Mom and me, pocketing my financial support for yourself. It's the same as theft or fraud. The $1,000 I earned working, I want the 3 months' worth back, right now.
Confronting Robert, he narrowed his eyes and glared at me. His worn-out t-shirt looked shabby, and his unkempt hair lacked cleanliness. It's no wonder his jobs never lasted. Whether his claim about his workplace shutting down is true remains doubtful. As Robert and I faced off, the sound of a car door opening and closing came from behind. Turning around, I saw Mom getting out of my car parked nearby. Today was supposed to be the day we went out for dinner together. We planned to meet outside and then leave again after I dropped off my things at home, but Mom came down first when she saw Robert in front of the apartment.
Is what you just said true?
Mom asked Robert with a cold voice.
Because Robert is here without any notice, I got curious and listened from the window. You gave me a debit card secretly from Nancy, stole the original card, and took the money for yourself.
Mom's calmly assertive demeanor was imposing, reflecting the wisdom of an experienced parent. Yet, Robert, without showing any fear or apology, blatantly stated, "What's the big deal?"
Both Mom and Nancy, why are you getting so worked up over just $1,000?
His unabashed attitude filled me with an indescribable rage.
Just $1,000. He has no idea how much effort I've put into earning that money through study and gaining trust at work. Mom has her old age pension, and you have a stable job as a civil servant. I don't have a job nor money. What's wrong with taking money from those who have it?
As Robert made his excuses, suddenly, Mom raised her voice.
Enough! How much more do you plan to disrespect your family?
The intensity of her anger made even me flinch.
How long will you trivialize your parents' money? Your sloppy lifestyle is his own business. As parents, we'll help if necessary. But to meddle with Nancy's money is beyond forgiveness. What's with that tone? Are you saying it's wrong for me to receive $1,000 and Nancy is the victim because she's a civil servant? Or because she's a woman? Isn't that discrimination?
Robert, becoming hysterical, ranted nonsensically.
That's not it. It's about keeping promises, returning what you borrow, basic decency.
Mom stood her ground, unflinchingly educating Robert.
It's not just this time. You also never repaid the compensation money for the divorce lawsuit we advanced on your behalf, despite promising to do so.
Perhaps the culmination of all the patience she had been storing up exploded, as Mom's eyes narrowed and her lips trembled with anger.
Compensation from the divorce trial.
I was taken aback by these sudden words. A story I had never heard from either Mom or Robert before. It was entirely new to me. Mom looked at me with a slightly awkward face and began, "Actually, I hadn't told you, Nancy, but when Robert got divorced before, there was compensation involved in the divorce trial. He seemed to have no money at the time, so we covered it, promising he'd pay us back. But years have gone by, and he hasn't repaid a cent.
There's no helping it if I don't have the money."
Glancing sideways at Robert's defiance, I timidly asked Mom,
Compensation in a divorce trial isn't normal, right? I thought they just split because they didn't get along. Could it be cheating?
Hearing this, Mom's eyebrows drooped deeply with disappointment, and she let out a heavy sigh. That's right. Robert had an affair, which led to the divorce. He even had the audacity to say terrible things to his wife, causing quite a mess. The compensation ended up being quite a sum. I felt profound contempt for Robert. Irresponsible with money, deceitful to family, and now adultery and causing trouble with his ex-wife. How far gone as a human can he be? It's too shameful for a family.
What? That's the worst. Mom, why didn't you tell me?
I didn't want to worry you with such unpleasant news, Nancy. The compensation from the divorce trial wasn't an amount we couldn't cover. I hoped he'd at least pay back half. Robert retorted, with his teeth clenched, at Mom who glared at him.
Don't bring up the past. There's no way I can pay it back. You mean you have no intention of paying it back?
Mom's voice echoed definitively. As if saying there was nothing more to discuss, Mom pulled Robert by the arm, urging him to leave. Despite the age difference between a woman in her 60s and a man in his 30s, Mom's strength at that moment was formidable. I backed Mom up and pushed Robert towards leaving.
One last question, Robert. What did you spend the money you took from Nancy on?
When Mom questioned him, Robert answered nonchalantly.
On various things.
Living expenses, alcohol, gambling. Mom and I were furious to learn that precious family money was spent on alcohol and gambling.
That's enough. It was my fault for letting Robert be, thinking he's an adult. He didn't lose his job because the store closed down. He was fired for his poor attitude, something I'm well aware of. Now, even if it kills you, work and pay back the money you stole from Nancy.
Mom pushed Robert out onto the street and quickly got into the car with me, as if fleeing. Afterward, in the car I was driving, Mom was making calls. It seemed she was directly arranging a job for Robert. From the conversation, it was apparent it was a live-in job where he'd be kept busy from morning till night. Mom and I then went for the meal we had promised. Despite the unexpected events, Mom thoroughly enjoyed our meal at the restaurant. We were able to delve into the story around Robert's divorce. Learning about his affair that began from a drinking party and continued with dates, quickly discovered through phone records. Both of us were appalled anew at Robert, but the delicious meal helped lighten our mood. Steak that was perfectly cooked, and pot au feu with the flavors deeply infused. Every dish was delicious and wonderfully prepared. Our conversation eventually turned to brighter topics, such as places we wanted to visit and food we wanted to try, allowing us to end the day on a positive note. Then, a few weeks later, I heard from Mom. Apparently, Robert has been working non-stop at the live-in job from dawn till dusk. Mom had arranged with the employer not to let him return until he had repaid all the debts to his parents and the money he had taken from the financial support in full. In a workplace with many strict rules, being constantly monitored by a boss while working. Mom passionately explained that this was a chance to completely reshape Robert's twisted character and sloppy lifestyle from the ground up. Neither Mom nor I have been in direct contact with Robert, but from what we've heard, the stress of not being able to live his previously self-indulgent life has visibly drained the vitality from his face. Then, regarding the financial support, Mom said, "I really feel bad about accepting the money.
I can manage with the old age pension and the savings."
She strongly refused, leaving me, who wanted to help Mom, a bit troubled.
"But I can't stand not doing anything. How about treating you to dinner once a month at that restaurant we went to?" "Well, I might indulge in that. That restaurant was really delicious. I've been wanting to go back. And you, save your money for your own future."
Mom's warm words deeply touched me. How could anyone deceive or steal from a parent who cares so much for us? My feelings haven't changed since I was a child. I want to make my parents happy, who raised me to be who I am. And so, I continued to have monthly meals with Mom, leading a peaceful life. It seems Robert has continued working at the job Mom arranged for him, slowly repaying the money he took. He also seems to be starting to repay the compensation money for the divorce trial that he owed Mom. I went to thank Thomas, who helped us through this ordeal, again. As an apology for the trouble, I invited him for a meal, and he readily agreed. I took Thomas to the restaurant Mom and I frequently visit. When I shared our story, Thomas was shocked and sympathetic.
"It's unbelievable someone would misuse a bank account against their own family. I thought about cutting ties, but it seems he's managing somehow in the new job Mom arranged. Really, thank you for everything. The peaceful life Mom and I are living now might be thanks to you."
Thomas smiled bashfully at my words. Thomas, who works at a bank, is a well-put-together person, displaying proper manners at the dinner table. As we talked, we found our tastes in food matched.
"This restaurant is really nice. The atmosphere is calming, and both the pot au feu and steak are delicious." "Really? I often come here with Mom. We love the cuisine, it's one of our favorite places.
Thomas nodded with a serene expression as I said this.
Both you and your mom have great taste in food. If you like, let's come here again together.
And like that, we felt a good vibe between us, keeping in touch afterwards. As promised, we started going out together a few times.
When I mentioned this to Mom, she laughed.
It's strange how a good relationship formed because of that turmoil. Someday, Mom, Thomas, and I might have a meal together. No matter what the future holds, I want to fully support the important people close to me. Don't talk to me, I'm tired. Christopher coldly averted his eyes, pushed my shoulder as I stood in front of him, and walked away to the changing room. Wait. I tried to call out, but no voice came out. As Christopher's indifferent back disappeared, I felt dizzy and involuntarily knelt down. I can't believe this. He didn't even change a single expression on his face. I've been putting up with him for so long now. Maybe it's partly my fault. Maybe Christopher is just busy with work, I tried to convince myself, looking for reasons to justify his behavior. I believed that if I changed, Christopher would return to his old self. I thought I had done everything possible for that. But still, Christopher didn't change. That's why I resorted to the last option. I had resolved that this would truly be the end. I decided to get a divorce once and for all. It was then that I noticed a new message on Christopher's mobile phone on the table. I was shocked when I saw it without thinking.
What the?
Seeing that I vowed to myself. I had no choice but to brace myself. I'm going to show that man. I am Zoe, 26 years old. I recently married Christopher after dating him for about 3 years and moved out of my home. It's odd to say it myself, but being the youngest, I was doted on. So, on the day I left, my whole family cried.
Be happy, Zoe. Christopher, please take care of Zoe. Of course, sir.
Despite Dad's statement that seemed to pressure, Christopher answered with a relaxed smile.
I'm really counting on you.
There are 2 reasons why Dad emphasized this so much. The first reason is that Christopher has a history of divorce. Moreover, he ended his first marriage in just 6 months. The reason for the divorce was supposedly due to personality differences, but the brevity of the marriage was concerning. Dad had consented to the marriage, but had always been worried about that.
I understand your feelings all too well as a man. So, today, I thought I'd make a clear statement.
Christopher declared loudly and pulled out something he had brought. It was, astonishingly, a filled-out divorce application form. Though it may seem an aberrant act by common standards, Christopher said earnestly and handed something to Dad.
If I can't make Zoe happy, please submit this.
Continuing, Christopher added to the bewildered Dad.
I apologize for causing worry to you all because of my divorce history. So, this is like an insurance. I won't need to use this. I'm determined to make her happy. Please accept it.
Dad was perplexed, but took Christopher's earnestness to heart. He silently nodded and accepted it. This was the second reason for Dad's worry. Christopher was quite the charmer and an eccentric man.
Understood. I'll trust you.
Dad nodded with a complicated expression. Our married life began like this. Not to say it was a dream come true, but I was looking forward to our marriage. However, what awaited me, full of anticipation, was an unexpected hell. After quitting my job and becoming a housewife, I woke up earlier than Christopher every day, prepared everything, and saw him off with a smile.
Have a good day. Do your best.
Before we were married, Christopher would respond with a hug and a kiss.
I'm off. I'll do my best for you.
He would always sew and leave the house, waving his hand. But after marriage, Christopher changed. Yeah. With just that single word, Christopher would leave the house. His aloofness was so surprising that at first, I wondered if he was feeling unwell. Furthermore, when he returned home, Christopher was strange. Welcome home. Would you like dinner? Or would you like to take a bath? I greeted him with the usual line. To that, Christopher languidly replied, Bath. Just bath? Is something wrong? Confused, I couldn't help but ask, but Christopher just looked at me coldly for a moment and replied, Nothing. Thinking back, maybe getting any response was better than nothing. Now, a week into our marriage, Christopher has stopped responding altogether. When he's in a good mood, he might still react with a word or a gesture, but the problem is when he is in a bad mood. When Christopher is in a bad mood, he completely ignores me. Hey, don't ignore me. You've been like this ever since we got married. Did I do something wrong? Christopher didn't reply. Please say something. When I started to feel down and tears were about to fall, Christopher sighed heavily upon seeing this. You think crying solves everything, don't you? Must be nice being a woman, it's so easy. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't stop the tears. I silently looked down, the only thing I could do was hide my tears. Actually, my dad runs a company. I am what you would call a president's daughter. Before getting married, I worked as an office clerk at my dad's company. That's where I met Christopher. I, an office clerk, often handled the sales slips of Christopher, who was in sales. We gradually became close, and he asked me out. He seemed very surprised to learn I was the president's daughter, but that made me happy. He saw me not as the president's daughter, but for who I am personally. Back then, Christopher who would earnestly listen to my stories and respond with a smile. But that Christopher is long gone now. I wish I hadn't married him. Is there some reason for this? Did I do something wrong? I thought about it, but couldn't find any reason. The only thing that seemed to have caused Christopher to change so drastically was the marriage itself. Getting married, some people change due to relaxation or familiarity. I think that happens to some extent. But in Christopher's case, it was more than just to some extent. If I had known he was like this before marriage, I would never have married him. I took out a sheet of paper from a file I had kept in my desk. It was the divorce application form that Christopher had given me that day. If I submit this to the city hall, would the old Christopher come back? I spent days looking at the divorce application form and then putting it back. One day, when I returned from shopping, Christopher was standing in the doorway with a scary look on his face, waiting for me. It was the middle of a weekday. Why was he at home? Wondering, I tried to smile and spoke. Welcome home. Christopher slammed the table. Startled by the noise, I stumbled and fell. Christopher took a few steps closer, looked down at me coldly, and showed me the paper he was holding. Do you know what this is? In fear, I nodded. What Christopher held was the filled-out divorce application form. It was supposed to be always in the drawer, but why? Then I realized. Maybe I had looked at it before shopping, as usual, and forgot to put it back. Do you want to divorce me? Well, I couldn't say it wasn't true. Life with Christopher recently has been mentally exhausting. If this kind of life continues, I am considering divorce. It's because you've been strange since we got married. Lately, you ignore everything I say, and I can't call this happiness. So it's my fault. Then he stared at the divorce application form. I'm fine with divorcing. What? But remember, in this case, Zoe, you're the one at fault. The problem lies with you, failing to support your husband as a wife. Christopher waved the divorce application form. But Christopher, you said to Dad. He promised he would make me happy. Before I could finish, Christopher seemed to realize something and snorted. Promise to make you happy, huh? A typical princess way of thinking. How could you? You and your family are too naive. Clearly, our worlds are too different. It might be good for you to experience poverty for once. I didn't understand what Christopher meant, but from that day on, he stopped giving me any living expenses. Moreover, he even took away my credit card and debit cards. Originally, I quit my job because Christopher wanted me to. "I want you to greet me cheerfully when I come home," Christopher said, and I became a housewife to fulfill his request. Now, as a housewife, I have no income. It seems Christopher was paying for the rent and utility bills, but the biggest problem was food. "The food at home is almost gone. Please, I need living expenses." Although it was humiliating, I begged Christopher. Christopher seemed pleased and said something outrageous. "Don't worry. I'll eat out."
What? Wait a minute.
No matter how much I pleaded, he completely ignored me, and I ended up not getting any living expenses. Christopher continued to come home late night after night. I managed to survive on the remaining food and instant meals, but I had reached my limit. On a rare day when Christopher came home on time, I finally voiced the thoughts that had been haunting me. "You don't give me any money, and you don't talk to me. This isn't happiness. This isn't even a marriage. If this life continues, if you don't intend to change, please, let's get a divorce." I hoped that this might make Christopher change even a little. If he didn't change at all, then I would give up. It was my last resort. I waited anxiously for Christopher's response. Christopher looked down and scratched his head, then spoke in a low voice. "Don't talk to me, I'm tired." Christopher coldly averted his eyes, pushed my shoulder as I stood in front of him, and walked away to the changing room. "Wait." I tried to call out, but no sound came out. As Christopher's indifferent back disappeared, I felt dizzy and involuntarily knelt down. I can't believe this. He didn't even change a single expression on his face. I had endured so much. Christopher had changed his attitude completely after marriage, and I wondered if it was partly my fault. Maybe it's because he's busy with work. I tried to convince myself, looking for reasons to justify his behavior. I believed that if I changed, Christopher would return to his old self. I thought I had done everything possible for that. But still, Christopher didn't change. That's why I had to take the final step. I had resolved that this would truly be the end. There was no sign of disturbance on Christopher's face. Normally, wouldn't someone panic a little if their spouse they loved asked for a divorce? Instead, Christopher looked terribly bothered. Seeing that face made it clear. Christopher no longer loved me. "Let's get a divorce, once and for all. There's no point in continuing this marriage. I'm hungry, and I might as well pack my bags right now." I slowly stood up and headed towards the drawer where the divorce application form was kept. Then, I noticed the screen of Christopher's mobile phone on the table lighting up. It seemed like a message had arrived. I intended just to glance at it, but what I saw shocked me. "What the?" Displayed on the mobile phone was a screen full of heart emojis. I impulsively picked up the mobile phone to check the message. "Thank you for yesterday. Let's spend another night together soon." The sender of the message was someone named Lily. I tried to remember, but I had no recollection of anyone named Lily. I checked towards the changing room. There was still no sign of Christopher coming up. Looking back at the mobile phone, it was carelessly left unlocked. I sighed. The more I looked, the more evidence of infidelity I found. The message exchanges alone confirmed the intimacy with Lily, but there were even pictures of them snuggling close together. Leaving such conclusive evidence without even locking the phone, how careless could one be? Or did he think it was okay to be found? "I'm being underestimated." I became oddly calm. I recorded the mobile phone screen with my phone, keeping evidence of everything that might be relevant. After finishing, I placed the mobile phone back on the table, and Christopher came out of the bath. Without saying a word, and without any follow-up to earlier, Christopher retreated to his room. It was simple. Christopher was cheating. That's why he had been so distant. In my sorrow, I understood. From the next day, I started working towards divorcing Christopher. There was no more hesitation or confusion. All that was left was anger at being betrayed. First, I needed to find out who Lily was. Hiring a professional would be more reliable, so I decided to hire a detective. At the same time, I started my own investigation. Christopher's recent late work hours and weekend work seemed suspicious if he was cheating. I could quickly verify the facts with Dad's help. Though it pained me to worry him, there was no other choice. I needed to do what needed to be done. I'll show him hell. The hardest part during the divorce preparations was having to see Christopher's face even in such times. The face I once found dear now only brought up the desire to slap him. Maybe my disdain showed.
You're looking uglier than usual. Are you sick or something?
Christopher initiated a conversation. Couldn't he have found something nicer to say? I answered with a smile. I'm fine. Once the preparations were done, there would be no need to stay here any longer. Taking advantage of the weekend when Christopher went to work as usual, I decided to take action. I told everything to Dad, who was furious and immediately arranged a place for me to move. I had initially thought of returning to my parents' house, but my sister had just returned there for her childbirth. Considering the circumstances, staying at my parents' house was not an option. So, Dad arranged a mansion worth $1 million. It belonged to a relative who was about to put it up for sale. They weren't in a hurry to sell, so they let me stay there. Dad also gave me enough money for my immediate needs, so my life was back to normal. In fact, it became more comfortable.
Where the hell are you now?
The call from Christopher, full of surprise, came 3 days after I left the house.
Who knows?
So I replied, and Christopher's voice grew tense.
And the divorce papers are missing. Don't tell me you.
This surprised me too. He noticed the missing divorce papers quite quickly. Did he start searching frantically after realizing I was gone? This was the first time I've seen Christopher so flustered. Even through the phone, I could picture his panic, which made me laugh a little.
What about it? I've submitted them to the office.
When I answered calmly, Christopher made a strange noise.
What? Why?
You said, remember? If you can't make me happy, I should submit them.
You even declared it with a smug face. That was just to reassure Zoe's parents.
So he was panicking because I actually submitted the divorce papers, which he intended only as a performance?
And I told you before. If this kind of life continues, I want a divorce. That time I was just tired. I talked to Dad, and he said your department isn't that busy.
I cut off Christopher's attempt to blame his fatigue. He always claimed to be busy, returning home late and frequently worked on weekends. I never doubted him, just worried. But I should have questioned it. Was Christopher really going to work, or should I have investigated?
I found it odd, you know? I asked Dad when I saw him yesterday. He was puzzled too. Overtime is one thing, but weekend work should only happen a few times a year, so he was also wondering why. No, well... Hey, you weren't working, were you? What were you so busy with every week? Where were you going?
Christopher didn't respond. I knew it. He couldn't answer. In his mind, Christopher was probably scrambling for an excuse. He's smart and smooth-talking. But this time, nothing he said would matter. Because I already knew everything. Lily, right? She's quite the cutie. I could tell Christopher gasped over the phone.
How did you? Detectives are quite efficient. They secured photos and videos as evidence right away.
I looked over the photos and report in my hand, reading aloud. Lily.
A 22-year-old office worker in the accounting department. Oh, more than a decade younger than you. I'm 8 years younger too. Christopher seems to like younger women. Lives in an apartment near the downtown area, 2nd floor.
Wow, so you've been visiting her every week.
Zoe, wait, Lily is...
Christopher is quite the needy one. He used to cling to me a lot before we got married. Seeing Christopher, 8 years older, acting so needy made me happy back then, but now the mere thought disgusts me.
By the way, Conversations with Lily are also safely recorded as evidence. Wait until I divorce my wife. What a classic line from a married man. Couldn't you come up with something better?
The detective also suggested that Christopher looked down on me quite a bit. Your wife will find out, you know.
It doesn't matter, she's on her way down anyway.
That's what he said. I was utterly underestimated.
Wait, Zoe. You're misunderstanding something. Can we meet just once?
I suppose.
I was thinking we should meet one last time.
The next night, we agreed to meet, with Lily accompanying him. The venue was the mansion I was renting. When Christopher arrived at the designated time, he seemed uneasy.
What's with this mansion? It's a place I'm renting. It's worth $1 million. $1 million!
Christopher's voice cracked, and Dad watched him intently.
So, your dad is here too?
Christopher's eyes darted nervously. Well, yes.
It's only fair since you brought Lily. Plus, this affair involves company employees. It's best to have Dad here, as he's the company's head.
I suppose you're right, Christopher said with a forced smile. Dad glared at Christopher the entire time. Lily, with her bright hair and petite frame, looked cute, but had a surprisingly strong personality. As soon as the discussion began, glaring at me, and she opened her mouth.
I'm a victim too. I had no idea Christopher was married. And now, I'm dragged here. It's unpleasant.
Lily's assertiveness surprised me. But Christopher looked even more shocked.
What? You were the one pushing me to leave my wife. That was just a joke.
Christopher turned red with anger at Lily's evasion.
Why did I even bother to have a relationship with such a woman?
I could hear him mutter. Lily snapped back, and they started arguing right in front of us.
To think I'd be serious about an old man like you. Excuse me? Who do you think caused all this? You said our company was doomed. That's why I decided to end it with Zoe.
Wait, what? Apparently, right after we got married, Lily had whispered to Christopher.
The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. As a husband, you'll end up suffering too.
Initially, Christopher didn't take her seriously, but Lily was persuasive, and he began to believe her. Seeing me act considerately towards him, he concluded the company must indeed be in trouble.
I thought you were sweet-talking me to saddle me with debts.
What?
I thought you were just tired. I found it odd that everyone was being overly kind to me.
Perhaps his boss and co-workers were being cautious because he married the president's daughter. But the idea that Dad's company was in crisis was a complete misunderstanding. Dad, being present during this conversation, also confirmed.
Thanks to everyone, we're actually thriving. There's absolutely no chance of going under anytime soon.
At Dad's words, Christopher fell to his knees.
I had a bad feeling, so what was all this for?
Ultimately, Christopher was just caught in Lily's scheme. Lily was intrigued by Christopher, who had married the president's daughter, and approached him out of curiosity. Initially ignored, she lied to catch his attention.
The company is finished. Being married to the president's daughter puts you at risk too.
Apparently, this lie worked on Christopher. Fearing a joint downfall with us, Christopher probably started ignoring me, hoping for an amicable divorce.
I was just deceived, Zoe, you understand, right?
Christopher approached me with a strained face.
Well, perhaps you were merely deceived. Yes, I was, so let's not talk about divorce. But you know, this has made things very clear to me.
Christopher looked up at me, puzzled. Essentially, this man would be the first to flee if we were ever in the same predicament. And this time, he even cheated without consulting me about how business was going first. Moreover, instead of proposing divorce directly, he manipulated things so that it would seem like the suggestion came from me, which is the height of cowardice.
You know the vows, in sickness and in health. You would probably abandon me without hesitation if I fell ill.
No, I wouldn't do that, Zoe. Please listen.
There's nothing left to discuss. I just wanted to know why you were ignoring me. All this time, I thought I had done something wrong. Let's handle the rest through our lawyers. Lawyers?
Christopher's face went pale.
Having an affair while married, did you think there wouldn't be any consequences? I'll make sure both you, Lily, and you, Christopher, are properly charged for the divorce proceedings. Wait. If I can't even stay at the company, how can I afford the shorty for a divorce trial?
Christopher's voice trembled, and almost simultaneously, Lily also raised a panicked shout.
No way, that's ridiculous. It was all just a joke, and it's his fault for falling for it.
The two of them blamed each other, each insisting they were not at fault. The sight of that was so ugly it made me sick. Had I endured a month of agony for these people? How pathetic. To the arguing pair, I said with a smile.
Now I understand.
You two are perfect for each other. So alike. I made the right decision stepping back. Well, we won't be seeing each other again.
Goodbye. Wait, Zoe!
Dad put his arm around my shoulder protectively. We left them behind. Christopher kept calling my name from behind, but I ignored him thoroughly. Later, I received the surety for the divorce proceedings from both Christopher and Lily. Christopher, apparently having a decent amount of savings, paid it in one lump sum. Lily's payment came from her parents, also in a lump sum. And as for their places at the company,
we'll have to fire him.
I tried to calm Dad, who was furious, while pondering what to do, but eventually, the two of them couldn't stand the scrutiny and resigned on their own. I was relieved, but Dad was the one who was most relieved and happy about it. Christopher seemed to have been crying till the end because he couldn't let go of the past. If only he hadn't done what he did. Perhaps what Christopher really regretted was losing the title of being the president's son-in-law. The thought of never having to see his face again felt refreshing. Returning home as a divorcee, my family welcomed me warmly. I also returned to my job as an office clerk. I thought I might be treated delicately, but to my surprise, everyone welcomed me back warmly. Since it's over, I was always wondering why someone like you chose him. Someone said so, patting my back, which made me burst into laughter. If I ever get married again, I'll make sure to avoid someone who's only good on the outside.
I'm selling this house because I'm moving in with my girlfriend.
Dad, who betrayed Mom, further hurt her. This house was in Dad's name, but Mom had contributed a significant amount of money to build it, and she loved this house. Yet, Dad decided to claim everything for himself without considering Mom's feelings. Now, 12 years after my parents' divorce, I've come to understand things I couldn't back then and decided to take revenge on Dad. I couldn't forgive Dad for living comfortably after hurting Mom, who had struggled to raise me. Does your company condone affairs? That's what I told them during my interview at Dad's company. My name is Chloe. I'm a 21-year-old senior in college, currently job hunting. When I was in 4th grade, my parents divorced, and we moved to Mom's parents' house, which meant changing schools and my entire environment, which led to some mental instability. I wasn't very sociable, so making friends was hard. Being a child of divorce, I was often left out, and I didn't have the courage to initiate conversations. For the 2 years from the transfer until graduating elementary school, I had no close friends and felt isolated, often getting sad remembering friends from my previous school. Moreover, Mom was working all day, so our time together decreased, and I spent more time with my grandparents. My grandparents were caring, but having always been with my parents, I found it hard to open up to them. However, things settled down when I started middle school. There were many students from different elementary schools, so I finally met people who didn't prejudge me for my parents' divorce. I made friends and slowly started to become happier, leaving behind my constant sadness. Determined not to burden Mom, I focused more on my studies. I got a scholarship that covered tuition for college, leading to a busy life filled with studies and part-time work. I wanted to make Mom's life peaceful and happy, so even in my busy life, I felt fulfilled. I've become more sociable than before, but the trauma from my past still lingers. Until 4th grade, when my parents divorced, I lived a normal life with both mom and dad. I was a shy child, so even though I had friends, I mostly spent weekends with my family. I think I was a child who loved my parents dearly. We used to have family meals together every morning and evening, and after dinner, we'd spend time together as a family. But then Dad started coming home late from work, and there were nights he wouldn't return before I went to bed. Dad was already in a managerial position then, and Mom told me he couldn't come home because of the responsibilities and overtime. Even though I felt lonely, I understood that it was Dad's job that provided for our current lifestyle. So I hoped Dad would be able to finish work earlier. This routine continued until one night, I woke up and heard my parents arguing. This was something that had never happened before, and curiosity overcame my anxiety. I cautiously approached to see what was happening. Dad, angry and carrying his belongings, stormed out of the living room.
Enough! I'd rather be with my girlfriend than you. We're getting a divorce.
Mom started crying at his words, but Dad ignored her and headed for the front door.
Dad!
Knowing what divorce meant, I feared I'd never see Dad again, so I ran after him and clung to him, hoping the kind dad who used to play with me would stop.
Get out of my way!
But Dad, who had never been rough with me before, glanced at me coldly and shook me off without hesitation. Thrown harshly, I rolled down the hallway, bruising myself. I burst into tears from the shock of Dad's anger and being pushed away. And the pain made the reality even harder to bear. Confused about why Dad suddenly became cold towards me, I couldn't stop crying. Mom hugged me while I cried, but Dad left the house without looking back, even though I was crying. Seeing Dad leave like that, I felt abandoned and cried even harder. This incident made me afraid to trust anyone but Mom for a while, and I think it made me even more introverted. Dad never returned after that, and we continued living in the house, but a few days later, he came back. I briefly hoped we could be a family again, but that hope was quickly shattered.
I'm selling this house because I'm moving in with my girlfriend. Get out.
Dad showed Mom some documents. I remember this house being built when I was in 1st grade. Mom was delighted to have our own home. I was sure they had built it together. So Mom protested Dad selling the house on his own, but since it was in his name, she had to give up. Thus, Mom and I were forced to move to her parents' house. As a child, I was not privy to the dealings between Mom and Dad that followed. However, I often wondered why Mom worked so hard, even though she probably should be receiving compensation and child support. I assumed part of her effort was for my sake, but I thought we would have more financial leeway if Dad had been paying child support. Curious, I asked my grandparents about it during high school. I thought Mom wouldn't want to tell me, and it must have been a painful topic for her too, so I couldn't ask her. According to my grandparents, it seemed Dad had fled without paying any alimony or child support. Mom had contacted him numerous times about the missing payments, but after he became unreachable, she decided to prioritize our future and let it go. As I suspected, their divorce was due to Dad's infidelity, confirming that he had betrayed our family. Hearing this from my grandparents, I understood why Mom worked so hard and felt a surge of anger towards Dad. Mom, it seemed, had given up pursuing Dad further and hadn't even tried to find his address to urge him to pay for alimony or child support. Though I was angry with Dad, who didn't seem to have much remorse, my desire to ease Mom's burdens quickly overshadowed it. I wanted to make sure Mom, who always prioritizes me over herself and is busy from morning till night, could have some time to relax. I've always thought that Mom should take more care of herself. Using my anger towards Dad as motivation, I doubled down on my studies, aiming to land a good job to assist Mom. The thought of Dad living carefree was frustrating, but I tried not to dwell on it, focusing instead on our current life, just like Mom. As a university student beginning to think about job hunting, I was organizing our storage to create a better resume. I hoped to recall past experiences for my self-promotion. While sorting through storage, I found letters from friends before I transferred schools in elementary, immersing myself in memories. Then, I came across an unfamiliar box. Curious, I opened it and found it contained documents from an investigation into Dad's infidelity. I was shocked to find these hidden away. Though I had tried to stop thinking about Dad, I still wanted to know what had happened between my parents. Compelled, I began to read the documents. As I read the story in more detail than what I heard from my grandparents, my desire for revenge against Dad grew. My grandparents probably had chosen their words carefully or didn't know the full extent. Reading further, I realized Dad had done worse things than I had imagined. He had been unfaithful for longer than I thought, and it seemed he hadn't even tried to hide his late nights from Mom. His affair was with a woman 6 years his junior, who had had a difficult life herself. After a car accident left her mom dead, she had been working since she was a student because her dad had after effects. Despite having a more challenging life than mine, how could she not feel remorse for destroying a family? In the evidence photos of the affair, the woman walking arm in arm with Dad was visibly pregnant. I couldn't help feeling disgusted seeing the two of them looking so content together. To anyone unaware, they would seem like a happy couple. Yet in reality, they were two people who didn't care about the misery they brought upon Mom and me. I had tried not to dwell on my anger towards Dad, but seeing this, it was impossible. I felt an overwhelming urge to make them suffer, but I managed to hold back. I thought about how Mom would be saddened if anything happened to me and about the potential future of their child, who must be around middle school age by now, 12 years after the divorce. I couldn't forgive Dad and his mistress, but acting on my emotions would only harm their child, causing them the same pain I endured. I didn't want to stoop to Dad's level, and that thought stopped me. However, the anger was too strong to ignore. A few days later, on a weekend, I decided to visit the house mentioned in the investigation report. I doubted they would still be there after all this time, but I needed to check. Upon arrival, I found the house no longer existed, which left me with mixed feelings of disappointment and relief. I had wanted to confront Dad about his affair and ask about Mom, but the thought of actually meeting him was nerve-wracking. As I was walking away, convinced I would never meet him and that I should forget him, I noticed a nameplate with Dad's name. I stopped, startled. Trying to convince myself it was probably someone else, curiosity led me to observe the house more closely. It was a spacious family home with a play area for children. Being a weekend, I could faintly hear children's voices. If Dad had remarried his mistress after the divorce, it wouldn't be strange if they had a family. The thought was suffocating, and as I watched the front door open and children come out, I moved to a spot farther away to continue observing. Then, the parents followed, and despite looking older than in the photos, I recognized them as Dad and his mistress. Dad had built a happy family with his mistress without paying us any compensation or child support. While Mom struggled, Dad lived comfortably. Filled with anger, I clenched my fists. After watching them leave happily as a family, I headed straight to a detective agency and requested an investigation into Dad's family. I used all my savings and part-time job earnings for this. When I later received the investigation results, it confirmed that Dad had been living well after the divorce, with 3 children. While Mom and I struggled, Dad lived comfortably without facing any consequences for his affair, a fact that left me bitter. I realized I harbored not just anger but also resentment towards Dad and his mistress, who lived carefree after abandoning Mom and me. I wanted them to experience the same pain and hardship that Mom and I went through. However, recognizing that even though they were the worst, their children were innocent, I wanted to speak with them at least once, more for my peace of mind than for revenge. So, calming myself for a composed conversation, I decided to visit after school. Dad would be at work and the kids at school, leaving his housewife mistress, Abigail, at home. What was she thinking, having an affair with a married man and now living happily with him? With questions and things I wanted to say, I went to their house on a day school ended in the morning and rang the doorbell. As expected, Abigail answered. "Yes, how can I help you?" Her normal response irritated me, and I blurted out,
How can you live normally after stealing Dad from Mom and me and breaking up our family?
It seemed I wasn't as calm as I thought, speaking sharply without realizing.
What? What are you talking about?
She seemed quite dubious, possibly on guard because of the sudden question. Perhaps for her, an affair was something that could be easily forgotten. This thought made my chest tighten. Amazed at how she could pretend not to know, I explained everything about my relationship with Dad and what happened 12 years ago. I broke into tears recalling the past, but once I finished, I looked at her for a reaction. The truth I learned then solidified my resolve for revenge. Some time later, I went for a job interview. With good grades and active involvement in various activities, I had many strong points. I usually passed the document screening without issues, and this time, as I faced the interviewers, it seemed like I had already left a favorable impression again. 3 interviewers questioned me while reviewing my documents. Thanks to my preparation, I answered smoothly, and the interviewer's cheerful expression and impressed attitude made me feel quite confident. At the end, when they said I could ask any questions I had, I decided to ask something I had been wanting to know. Does your company condone affairs? What actions would be taken if an affair occurs? My question surprised the interviewers, leaving them momentarily speechless. After a pause, they said they hadn't encountered such a situation but would probably impose some penalty. And when asked why I was inquiring about this, I explained the whole situation. My father, who abandoned my mother through infidelity, works here and is currently having an affair within the company. One interviewer, visibly upset, slammed the table and stood up angrily.
Are you joking? How dare you come here and lie in such a manner? This is outrageous.
I immediately retorted. Please don't shout just because I hit a nerve, Dad. I had actually known that Dad worked in this company and that he was involved in interviews as personnel. Therefore, I purposely attended this interview to expose Dad's actions. There were many interviewees, and it wasn't certain Dad would be the interviewer, but I thought damaging his reputation would be enough. His aggressive response to my presence added credibility to my story, and I felt a sense of satisfaction. Initially, Dad didn't seem to recognize me, but he became unsettled after reading my documents. He didn't remember my face, but my name and educational background must have made him realize I was the daughter of his ex-wife. He seemed relieved when I showed no reaction to seeing him, thinking I hadn't recognized him. I calmly retorted to Dad's anger.
It's a fact that you cheated on Mom and are now in an affair with a younger woman in this company, right?
I'm just stating the truth. The investigation I had commissioned revealed not only about Dad's post-divorce family but also his infidelity. Apparently, Dad was quite the philanderer, having 3 kids and still fooling around. He was having an affair with a younger female colleague, and there were photos of them looking happy together, leaving no room for denial.
Is this some kind of harassment? Do you think you can get away with this?
Dad accused me of lying and tried to blame me. He had been successful in hiding his actions so far and was desperate not to be punished. Smirking, I continued. It's the truth, isn't it? I wanted to know what the company thinks about having such a person in a responsible position. Dad wanted to make me look bad, but that wasn't going to happen. The other 2 interviewers, having witnessed our exchange, looked displeased. I showed them the final piece of evidence. By the way, this is the report on Dad's infidelity. I trust you will review it and take appropriate action. Dad tried to dismiss what I said in a panic, but I handed the investigation report to the other interviewers, asking them to address the affair. Dad tried to grab me, but I dodged and delivered my final blow. Abigail knows about this and is coming to the office today. I had told Abigail about Dad's affair, and in her anger, she had planned to confront him publicly. So before leaving the interview room, I declared to Dad that he had no escape.
You told her? When did you even meet her?
Dad, shocked and not expecting I knew Abigail, froze. Ignoring him, I left the room. Dad's yelling could still be heard after I closed the door, drawing stares from other interviewees. Normally, the atmosphere would feel uncomfortable, but knowing that I had derailed Dad's smooth life brought me a sense of relief. Originally, I came to this company solely for revenge against Dad, so failing the interview was not a concern. Having finished my task, I was walking down the hallway when I heard footsteps running up from behind. Turning around, I saw Dad, his face red with anger, charging at me to throw a punch. Surprised, I managed to dodge and avoided injury, but I stumbled and fell. Looking down at me, Dad shouted angrily, "What have you done? If it weren't for you." As Dad tried to hit me again, I braced myself, unable to evade, and covered my head with my arms, preparing for the impact. However, before he could strike, Dad froze. "What are you doing to Chloe? And what's this about an affair? You told me you were single, but you've been deceiving me." Abigail had arrived, startling Dad. She swung her bag at Dad, who was ready to strike me, hitting and shielding me from him. "Abigail, it's not what you think." Dad panicked at Abigail's arrival, but as Abigail, angered and feeling deceived, started to confront him, they began to argue. Abigail, while shouting in anger, hit Dad with her bag, causing a major commotion. It turned out that when I confronted Abigail about the affair, she was unaware that Dad was married. "I'm sorry, even if I didn't know. You must have suffered a lot. I will definitely make it up to you. I'm truly sorry." She apologized tearfully. Further conversation revealed that she met Dad through work, and he had been helping her as a struggling motherless child. Dad had hidden his marital status, and they eventually started dating. Abigail had been working right after graduating high school in order to live with her father, who suffered from the after effects of an accident, which also took away her mother. It was natural to develop feelings for Dad, who had helped her. I had thought the mistress would be a terrible person, but Abigail was another victim of Dad. Apparently, Mom had never asked Abigail for compensation or even contacted her, and until now, Abigail was unaware of Dad's misdeeds. I wondered why Mom hadn't pursued compensation from Abigail, but then remembered she was pregnant at the time. Perhaps Mom didn't want to burden a pregnant woman, even if she was the mistress. Thinking this as I watched Abigail tearfully apologize, I realized she wasn't the villain I had thought her to be. She didn't look like she was trying to deceive me. So, I told her about Dad's current affair with a coworker. The investigation report included evidence of Dad's ongoing infidelity. I thought that Abigail, being a victim herself, deserved to know about Dad's current actions. When I showed her the documents, she became furiously angry at Dad. "He lied about being single, married me, and now this? What kind of person is he? I will never forgive him." Her anger towards Dad, the betrayer, ran deep, and together we decided to take revenge on him. Originally, I had applied to Dad's company and was already scheduled for a second-round interview. So, on the day of the interview, Abigail and I had planned to go to the company and publicly denounce Dad. The two caused quite a scene in the company hallway, with other male employees restraining Dad and security arriving. I took Abigail's hand and led her out of the company after the commotion. Many people had gathered around due to the noise. Among them, I spotted the woman from the investigation photos, hiding in the shadows with a petrified look on her face. My revenge was complete by exposing Dad's misdeeds, which had been hidden until now. Subsequently, Dad, who was on the verge of becoming a department head, got demoted to a regular employee due to the affair. Since most of the situation became known during the chaos in the hallway, he seems to be working with a sense of humility. He used to have a reputation as a family-oriented and capable supervisor, but when Dad's bad deeds became known within the company, he was branded the worst man and was treated coldly. The woman Dad had an affair with apparently quietly resigned from the company. Additionally, Abigail demanded compensation and child support from Dad and informed him of her intention to divorce. With the company's cooperation, Dad couldn't escape paying. During the divorce mediation, Abigail discovered that Dad had not paid any compensation or child support to my mom, and also learned of his gambling habits in addition to spending money for his lover. Though he claimed it was occasional, He had been deceitfully spending family savings on gambling. Abigail, further enraged by these revelations, successfully demanded a higher amount of compensation and child support from Dad. Dad tried to deceive until the very end and was very reluctant about the divorce and compensation, so the mediation didn't end quickly. But Abigail persistently questioned Dad, and the commotion became known even to those outside the company who were unaware of the chaos at the office. Consequently, acquaintances of Dad who were unaware of the situation gradually distanced themselves from him. Dad became completely isolated as a result. After the divorce, Abigail offered me a part of the compensation as an apology.
This might not be enough to make amends, but I hope you'll accept it as an apology for the trouble I've caused.
However, since I had kept my revenge against Dad a secret from Mom, I declined the money.
Abigail, you're also a victim of Dad, and the children need the money more. Please keep it for them.
Mom seemed to have put her past with Dad behind her, so I had no intention of bringing it up again. I thought that Mom, who must have suffered a lot, wouldn't want to remember it anymore, even after Dad received his comeuppance. I didn't harbor any resentment towards Abigail or her children, who were also victims of Dad. Instead, I frequently visited them, concerned about their well-being as a single-parent family. The children and I grew close, and I hope they grow up righteously, unlike Dad. Getting to know Abigail better, I realized she was naturally calm and not the type to raise her voice. The stark contrast to the woman who had fiercely confronted Dad in the company made me reconsider Mom's strength during the divorce. Later, I successfully got a job at my preferred company and shared the news with Mom, who was overjoyed at my growth. Seeing her happiness made me feel content. And without the shadow of Dad, I truly relished the moment. Determined to reduce Mom's burden, I geared up for my new job. I may never forgive Dad for his actions, but he's already received his just desserts. Now, I want to live happily, not worrying about Dad anymore.